Today on Locked On Boston Bruins, we're going to do a very early look at the Atlantic Division power rankings. I think the Bruins might move up, but I'm not sure if it's enough to get back into the playoff picture.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Thursday, July 24th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. As I said off the top, we are going to do a very early look at the Atlantic Division power rankings, where teams stand after early moves in the offseason, and whether or not the Bruins will be able to move up in the standings. I think they could be better than Buffalo, Detroit, maybe even Ottawa to put them in fifth spot. Maybe Toronto moves down a bit after losing Mitch Marner, but it's going to be a tough go for the Bruins to crack back into the top three at the very least. Now, we're also going to discuss the top remaining free agents. We're getting into, whether or not teams want to use their remaining cap space now, save it for flexibility during the regular season. We're going to get into PTO season soon. So who are the names available and who might I want the Bruins to target on a PTO? Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I'm a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I've been covering this team for various outlets for 20 years. So when it comes to the Atlantic Division, traditionally there was a clear 4-4 split. The Bruins were up there along with the Florida Panthers, Tampa Bay Lightning, Toronto Maple Leafs, where the Senators, Canadiens, Sabres, Red Wings were the bottom four. And that was the case for several years. That was upended this past season when both the Montreal Canadiens and the Ottawa Senators made the playoffs, with Toronto, Tampa, and Florida emerging as the new top three, Boston dropping all the way down. Is that trend going to continue in 2025-26? Well, let's start from the top and move our way down. And let's be honest, the defending two-time Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers likely aren't going to be bounced from the top spot anytime soon. After they beat the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup final once again, there were significant questions about whether or not they could keep the band together. And lo and behold, on June 30th, the Panthers were able to re-sign Aaron Ekblad to an 8-year, $6.1 million per season contract. Brad Marchand signed a 6-year, $5.25 million per season contract at age 37. And this was after they had already re-signed Sam Bennett, who was the Conn Smythe Trophy winner this past playoff run. So not only were they able to retain their core pieces, but they were also able to retain Bruins former captain, who helped put the team over the edge in the Stanley Cup Finals as a third liner. Now, that's a heavy commitment to Marchand, 6 years, maybe a bit less on the cap than what he was hoping to get from the Bruins, but certainly more term. That will take him till he's 43 years old. But for me, Florida Panthers remain the class of the Eastern Conference, the class of the Atlantic Division, class of the NHL. That team doesn't appear to be going anywhere anytime soon. They were also able to re-up with their top RFA, Mackie Samoskevich, added some depth in the form of Jack Stanika, Brandon Bussey, who we are all well acquainted with, added Daniil Tarasov as a backup, so they're doing pretty well. Now, when it comes to the rest of the division, I think the Tampa Bay Lightning are a clear second best team in the the Atlantic Division. They still have a core that they rode to great success. I talked to Casey Hudson of Nesson the other day about the departure of Steven Stamkos a couple of years ago, but they're still looking pretty good when it comes to their core players. Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, Jake Gensel, Brandon Hagel, Anthony Cirelli. And don't forget, they added Oliver Bjorkstrand prior to the trade deadline. And the one big move they made this offseason was trading their top prospect, Isaac Howard, to the Edmonton Oilers. But they're still pretty well set when it comes to a youth movement, with Connor Geekie likely getting a bigger role for this team, probably a third line scoring role for him, brother of Morgan as well. Victor Hedman, Ryan McDonough still locking things down on the back end. Andrei Vasilevsky, he's getting up there, but he's still one of the best goalies in the NHL. And I'm putting Tampa up in second because Toronto obviously lost a major piece in Mitch Marner, and I'm actually putting them down in fourth at the moment. I think the Montreal Canadiens may be a team to be reckoned with this season. They made the playoffs last year. They have such a talented, enviable young core, top line of Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, Uri Slafkovsky, Kirby Dach, hopefully healthy for them and able to perform at the level that he's capable of. Don't forget, they're going to have a full first season from Ivan Demidov, who they have signed for 2 years on his ELC, which is insane. Zach Bolduc was acquired from the St. Louis Blues. And of course, the big move on the blue line was acquiring Noah Dobson from the New York Islanders. And you got Lane Hudson there. You have Caden Gooley, Alexander Carrier, who played very well. Arbor Xhekaj. Like, it's a pretty good defense for them before Dobson. If he can return to form that he had with the Islanders, then this team could be much improved from last year's surprise run to the playoffs. I kind of have some questions about Sam Montembeault and Jacob Dobes in net, but I'm really, and it should be noted that they're over the cap right now. They'll have to bury, of course, Carey Price's contract, so they should be fine there. My big concern, my big reason for pumping up the Canadiens is the fact that the Maple Leafs lost Mitch Marner and have not replaced that 100 point. Like, that's crazy to me. Yes, they re-signed Matthew Nyes long term. They were able to get John Tavares back in the mix on a very team-friendly 4.38 per season contract. But after that, it gets pretty thin outside the top four. Max Domi is your fifth highest paid forward. They added Matias Maselli, Dakota Joshua, Nicholas Roy. But say Austin Matthews runs into injury trouble again, this team could be woefully thin when it comes to scoring depth. And you're also relying on, I question Montreal's goaltending. Anthony Stolarz, Joseph Wall played great last season, but is that a legit duo that can take you to the promised land. Their defense is very strong still with Morgan Riley, Chris Tanev, Jake McCabe, OEL, Brandon Carlo. They added Henry Thrun to go with Simon Benoit, round out their core. But Nicholas Robertson remains unsigned, and they're going to be hoping for a lot of production from like 8 forwards that may or may not be able to perform for this team. So they, for me, are a big question mark. Still see them as a playoff team, but could easily see them falling outside of the top 3 with Montreal jumping up and taking them out. Didn't even mention Patrick Laine in there as well. All right, that's it for the top 4. Let's take a look at the bottom 4 and where our Boston Bruins may fit into that mix as the podcast continues. Have you ever decided last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. The easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it all possible. It's fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Gametime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for exciting upcoming MLB games. Seat views right in the app so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive at the ballpark when you arrive. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. Let's continue our look at the Atlantic Division power rankings. I've already gone through the top 4, and my early look is Florida, Tampa, Montreal, and Toronto. We're going to start at the bottom here, and sorry to the Buffalo Sabres, but I'm putting them back down in the bottom. This team has, for pretty much the second straight summer, done absolutely nothing to improve their roster. And you look at where they stand right now. Tage Thompson, obviously a star player. Alex Tuch is an emerging star as well. But they have Josh Norris as their top paid forward. Ryan McLeod as number 3. Jason Zucker, Jordan Greenway up there. They haven't really got breakouts from Jack Quinn or Zach Benson. They did add Josh Doan. And Yuri Kulich is still there. Josh Doan coming over in a trade that took away one of their best offensive players in JJ Peterka. Yes, they added Michael Kesselring to a pretty solid defense core that includes Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power, Bowen Byram, Matthias Samuelsson, and they did add Alex Lyon to back up Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, with Devin Levi getting some extra time to marinate in the minors. But I just don't see it with this team once again. The Buffalo Sabres will not be making any big strides this coming offseason or this coming season. They, re-signed Ryan McLeod to an extension. But other than that, they didn't add anybody really prominent to this team. They re-signed Bowen Byram for a couple years. Their defense is pretty good, but otherwise, they traded Dylan Cousins last season for Josh Norris. Always an injury risk. I just don't see it once again for this team and really feel bad for their fan base once again. The Detroit Red Wings, similar situation. They did re-sign Patrick Kane, who could have been a free agent. They added James Van Riemsdyk, Jacob Bernard-Docker, Ian Mitchell, who we're familiar with. But same with this team. They just did not do anything really, to prove that they are going to take any steps forward. They do have some good talent up front in Dylan Larkin, Lucas Raymond, Alex DeBrincat, Patrick Kane stuck around, James Van Riemsdyk. We all know what he's about. On the back end, Moritz Seider anchors things, but after that, it's a real mess back there with Ben Sherratt, Justin Hall, Eric Gustafsson, Albert Johansson. Like, they just don't have it. They did trade for John Gibson to help solidify the goaltending position. He and Cam Talbot might be able to salvage something there, but the problem is, like I said, the defense is so leaky in front of them. I don't think they'll score enough to help get this team any further ahead than they have been in the previous seasons. All the not goodwill, but the reputation that Steve Yzerman built as an architect in Tampa has kind of all dissolved here in Detroit. He has just not done enough to turn this into a better team. So that leaves two teams remaining, our Boston Bruins and the Ottawa Senators. When it comes to the Senators, they were able to get Claude Giroux back into the mix. They did re-sign Nick Cousins. They added Arthur Kaliev on a small deal, which is pretty nice work for them to add to that depth. They had a very good season last year, obviously making the playoffs, pushing the Toronto Maple Leafs to 6 games in the first round. They don't have a first-round pick this year, which was forfeited. So that could be a consideration for them when it comes to the trade deadline. They won't have that to float in a deal. They do have a nice core in Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, Dylan Cousins, who I mentioned earlier, Drake Batherson, Fabian Zetterlund, re-upped with there. They have some veterans in David Perron, Claude Giroux, Shane Pinto is an emerging guy. Nice back-end add with Jordan Spence. But again, similar to Detroit, apart from Jake Sanderson and Thomas Chabot, I'm not convinced their blue line has it. Artem Zub, Nick Jensen, Tyler Klevin. Their goaltending, obviously anchored by Linus Ullmark, whose $8.25 million contract extension kicks in this season. It's going to come down to the Senators and the Bruins for that 5-6 spot, in my opinion. Now, we've talked ad nauseum about what the Bruins have and have not done this offseason. They did have some money to spend. They used it on Tanner Jeannot, Sean Kuraly, Jordan Harris, Michael Esimont, Matej Blumel, and Alex Steeves. They added Victor Arvidsson. I think the Bruins' improvements are going to come internally. You look at Charlie McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm coming back from injury. You look at Jeremy Swayman, hopefully getting back to form in conjunction with those returns. Emergence of Mason Lohrei, Nikita Zadorov continuing to find his footing as a leader on this team. They brought in Jeannot to take that physical burden off Zadorov, so hopefully he can focus more on defending than fighting. Andrew Peeke, Jordan Harris, Henry Jokiharju rounding out the defense core. You have David Pastrnak, who is one of the best players in the NHL, better than anybody on the Ottawa Senators. Hopefully Elias Lindholm, Casey Middlestat can lock things down in the top 6 centers. You get Morgan Geekie continuing to perform at a high level. Arvidsson maybe finding his offensive groove once again. I'm going to make a bold prediction and say the Bruins finish 5th in the Atlantic Division over the Ottawa Senators. That could be good enough for a wild card spot. And this is kind of going somewhat against the schedule look that I had been doing over the last little bit, where I thought maybe they're a 500 team. If you look at the NHL standings from last year, you had Montreal with the last spot, 92 points. So that's a shade over 500. The Bruins had 76 points, so they would maybe other Canadians had 91. So the Bruins would have to improve by 15 points or 7 wins in order to get back into the playoff mix. That's probably doable. Ottawa had 97 points. Florida only had 98, by the way, behind both Toronto and Tampa Bay. If you look over at the Metro, though, Washington, Carolina, New Jersey were your playoff teams. And then Columbus, the Rangers, Islanders, Penguins, Flyers. I don't know if any one of those 5 teams is going to be capable of ousting the teams in the Atlantic for a playoff spot. So I think it could still be 5 teams from the Atlantic, 3 from the Metro, and the Bruins will have to beat out the Ottawa Senators in order to grab that spot. So those are very early Atlantic Division power rankings. Agree, disagree, hit me up in the YouTube comments or on social at Locked NHL Bruins. Where do you see the Bruins finishing in the Atlantic based on what we've seen so far this offseason? There are a bunch of free agents still remaining, still room for potential improvement. We'll take a look at that list and some potential signings or PTOs here as the podcast continues. All right, so as we get closer and closer to training camp, the Bruins have $2.123 million in remaining cap space. They also have a lot of assets that they could possibly use in trades down the road. 2 first-round picks this year, 2 next year. They have their own 2nd and 3rd this year. They have a 4th from Tampa. And could be able to add a bit more offense here as we get closer to training camp. And there are a couple free agents that I would not mind them taking a look at. Some of the bigger names remaining include Jack Roslovic, Matt Grzelcyk still out there after a 40-point season last year with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Victor Olofsson could chip in offensively. Nikolai Kovalenko is available, and he is a guy that was drafted pretty highly, I thought, he was a 6th-round pick. Sorry. I'm thinking of Oscar Olofsson with the Colorado Avalanche. Couple goalies available. Bruins won't be looking there. Go down the list. Not a ton in terms of offensive potential. Jacob Lauko is still an unrestricted free agent, which is too bad. If there's one guy that I could see or I would like the Bruins to perhaps pursue, it would be Robby Fabbri. He's coming off a 3-year deal that paid him $4 million per season. He has had a ton of injury issues over the course of his career, playing a maximum 68 games a couple years ago with the Detroit Red Wings. He played 72 in his rookie season, but he's a guy with 20 goal potential, and if healthy, could be a nice reclamation project for the Bruins. I'm impartial to him because he played for the Guelph Storm, and I've always been a fan of his. Even in his draft year when he was up with Pasta, I was hoping he would fall to the Bruins. Thankfully, looking back, he was grabbed by the Blues, and the Bruins were able to get Pasta. But he's a guy with sneaky upside when it comes to offensive potential, who could be had cap wages projecting him at $992,000. He's 29. He did have only 16 points last season, but in very limited time. Hopefully he's happy, healthy, and I would not mind at all if the Bruins threw him a PTO to try to grab some scoring on the cheap. Cap wages, they've got some other scorers, other forwards under $200 that could be had. Roslovic, Olofsson, probably out of their range at the moment, but there's Thomas Tatar, who's had some success with the New Jersey Devils as of late. You have Jimmy Vesey, who was not re-signed by the New York Rangers. You have Fabbri, as I mentioned. Craig Smith is available, former Bruin. Daniel Sprong is going to the KHL. Maybe Max Pacioretty they bring in on a cheap deal. He played pretty well for the Maple Leafs in the playoffs, scoring some big goals. Jacob Vrana, he was not re-signed by the Washington Capitals, projected at around $866,000 for next season. Alex Nylander, Andreas Athanasiou, he's got some speed. Cam Atkinson, those are probably the guys that you're looking to potentially add cheaply via free agency. And the Bruins are very open to PTOs. We've seen that card played several times in the recent past. Danton Heinen, Tyler Johnson, and perhaps they float that option to see if some of these guys can come in and play on the cheap. Roslovic, Olofsson would be the bigger swings in terms of free agency, and if they can convince them to re-sign or sign cheaply, then perhaps that could be the case. Again, I mentioned Max Pacioretty. He could be weighing retirement. He could be looking to make one more run. If he does come back, it would likely be with a cup contender. Joel Kiviranta, I didn't mention, the Finnish Gretzky. He is a guy who was undrafted, but last season he had 16 goals for the Colorado Avalanche. Those are probably the guys that you're looking at. Maybe Kevin LeBlanc. The Blue Jackets took a one-year flyer on him. He had 56 points back in 2018, 2019. But again, probably not a guy that you sign outright, maybe just flash a PTO. If I had to pick one guy that I'd like the Bruins to do, it would be, of course, Robby Fabbri. And I'm sticking to that. Anyways, that's it for today's episode of the podcast, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me, especially you everydayers. I very much appreciate you. Programming note, I will be off next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, as the fam and I are heading up to a trailer near Southampton here in Ontario. Be back on August 1st with pretty regular shows through the month of August. Tomorrow, in honor of Happy Gilmore, we're going to discuss the age-old debate. Is Happy Gilmore a hockey movie? Preview Happy Gilmore 2, and also do a list of the top 10 hockey movies as a fun Friday activity. I hope you're all doing well. Please take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Check out the Locked On NHL podcast next as your second listen. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.